board here. As you guys can tell, I'm not Johnny Martin. Johnny's not able to join us tonight. He had a personal obligation, so I'm stepping in. I'm Jacob Arnold, the Executive Director of Veterans Future Foundation. Before I introduce our speaker tonight, who truly needs no introduction, I do have a shameless plug for those of you on the call, and we'll make sure we put this link in with the YouTube, and our email is we have an alumni app, or we have an alumni group in the Team RWB app. Our VFF team posts in there at least once a week. And honestly, Meg and Ryan are in there every week. So we're, 3 to 4 posts a week. And it's a great way to stay connected with everybody from UHP around the horn. And, we are creeping up on 100 members. We'd love to see much more than that as the year grows. So if you don't have the app, please download it. And if you haven't joined our group yet, please join. So with no further ado, our speaker tonight, back for the second time to kick off our new year, is Mike Erwin, the founder of Team Red, White, and Blue. I'm going to read from your brief bio here, Mike. He is a passionate leader, an Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonel, and founder of transformative organizations like Team Red, White, and Blue and the Positivity Project. With a mission to build resilience, foster positive relationships, and empower communities, Mike's work spans leadership coaching, veteran wellness, and youth development, impacting hundreds of thousands nationwide. And speaking personally, I've gotten to know Mike over the last couple of years. It's been such a privilege, man. And in my career, I've been able to work with a lot of organizations. And sincerely, Team RWB has been the most collaborative partner I've ever had. And that means the world, dude. So thank you for joining us again. I'll hand it off to you from here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, great to be here. And for those who are not live, great to be able to spend some time sharing some thoughts with everybody. I've actually, I did a little bit of a pre-call with Meg, a few weeks ago or whatever, but I thought I would take some liberty to talk about a couple of other things as well tonight, in addition to a big thing that we talk about at Team Red, White, and Blue called the BFG, or the Big Fitness Goal. But I'll kind of come back to that, and I'll kind of end on that because that's a little bit more the inspirational side. There's another element here about my life of the past 5 years or so, in many ways sort of reinvented myself. And I think it's worth sharing, with everyone here, specifically around nutrition. And again, I won't spend too much time digging into this or whatever, but, whatever your political views are, it's kind of irrelevant. At the end of the day, new administration coming in, and one of the big conversations happening, is around this idea of making America healthy again. I think we're gonna hear a lot about a lot of different things out there in terms of helping us to reconsider some of the things that we do that shape and influence our health. And I'm not going to get into a lot of the stuff, but I do want to focus really briefly here on what I've learned about nutrition. What I want to share here is sort of what I kind of would put it. I know that this may not be attainable for you depending on where you're at, personally, where you live, what your budget may be, what your priorities are in terms of, we all have limited revenue, to be able to spend. But back in, first of all, the first supermarket, let's play a little guessing game here. Go ahead and put in the chat. What year do you think the first supermarket in America was founded? What year? If you have chat, you can go ahead and throw it in the chat. I just would be interested to see. 1952, 1926, 55. All right, pretty close. I think it's like 1948, 1947, Vic says. It might actually be like, that might be like on the nose. But bottom line, it's post-World War II, right? So before then, if you wanted chicken, like you had to have a chicken at your house, right? And someone had to go wring its neck, and like you plucked the feathers and you cleaned it and eviscerated it, and that's how you got chicken. A lot of people had, like one person in the neighborhood or like that they knew would like raise the pig. Some of it had to do with refrigeration. Some of it had to do with just, the fact that, we didn't have all these big agricultural processes out there. All that to say a couple things. If you can, I would encourage you to try to find somebody in your area, if you don't already do this, to buy just some of your food from outside, the grocery store. And so that can be your eggs, that can be your beef, or your pork or your chicken, your turkey. Obviously, if you're vegetarian, like or vegan, like you can still, find like lots of like local farmers that sell sweet potatoes and lots of other foods that you eat. But the reason I say all that is because I've learned a lot, and I don't know how much some of you may already know all this, or you may know a little of this, or you may know nothing about it because I knew nothing of it until age 42 a few years ago, right? But the big thing that is really compelling is the micronutrition. And I just listened to a book by Joel Salatin called "This Ain't Normal." And he walks through. And so if you're looking for a great read, I would encourage you to consider listening to it or reading it. He wrote it in 2010, 2011, and he walks through the whole process of how our agricultural system has evolved and changed. And the bottom line is that the macros in the eggs, the beef, the chicken that you get from the store, the macros are there, right? The proteins, the fats, the carbohydrates. But from a micronutrient standpoint, it's not there. It's way less than if you find a local farmer or you raise your own, right? And I've done that over the past, 3-4 years, really kind of since COVID. And hopefully you guys don't hear I got two big Great Pyrenees and they love to bark at night. So hopefully you guys aren't getting that background noise. I can hear them like off in the distance. But just some food for thought to think about, where are you getting your food from? And is that an area that you may be open to like doing a little bit more research into? And again, for me, it's made a huge impact over the past 3-4 years. And again, a lot of these things I had no idea about. And so again, if you're interested, I would encourage you to pick up that book or listen to that book, This Ain't Normal by Joel Salatin. All right. So that's one point. The other big thing here to share a little bit, and I know most people here know at least a little bit about Team Red, White, and Blue, but I just want to say a few words about RWB and then use that to set the table to talk about the big fitness goal, where this idea came from, and why it's so powerful, and do a little storytelling of myself in 2024 and specifically the JFK 50 miler, right? So Team Red, White, and Blue, we're actually this year, we're celebrating our 15th year, which is pretty amazing, pretty crazy to think about. As we all know, businesses, nonprofits, doesn't matter. It's very easy for organizations to fail, to succeed for a couple of years and then go under. It requires a lot of perseverance, a lot of leadership, a lot of people sacrificing and rowing, especially in the early years of an organization to make it go. But we're turning 15, and we started out really focusing on helping veterans to reintegrate and to transition from active duty, Guard, and reserves. That was our initial focus for the first decade of our life. And right around in the start of COVID, we actually started to pivot before COVID. We evolved into focusing specifically on health and wellness, right? And so our vision is now that we are forging America's health and wellness community for veterans. So, we aspire to be a lot larger than we are right now. I think we're about 300,000 people have joined Team Red, White, and Blue since 2010. And we know that there's about 18 million living veterans. So like UHP, like we're on a mission to reach many more veterans than we have thus far, right? And we know that in many ways, we know this from the research that 40 to 42% of veterans, basically, they want what they describe in Team Red, White, and Blue. And the reality is they just don't know we exist. And you might say, well, how can you be around for 15 years and 83% of veterans don't know you exist? First of all, here's some humble pie, right? If you think that like you've been working at something for a long period of time and that surely that most veterans know who you are, they don't, right? And this is just the world today. It's very noisy. There's a lot of different organizations out there. There's a lot of people trying to do different things. And so at Team RWB, we're constantly on the mission to try to recruit, to grow, to reach more veterans, because we know that when they join our community, when they get involved in our digital garrison, when they get involved in real life opportunities, that it makes them better. It makes them healthier. It makes them happier. It makes them more successful, right? All these various things in life that I think we all want for ourselves, but we also want for fellow veterans, people that we've served with. You get those things when you join and you participate in Team Red, White, and Blue, all right? So where does the idea of the big fitness goal from? Back in 2012 and 13, I was a major in the Army at the time, and I was assigned to West Point. I was a assistant professor in leadership and psychology. I had the opportunity to essentially be the general's aide. He wasn't a general, he was a civilian, but more or less he was sort of at the same level of a three-star general, and that was Jim Collins. If anyone here has ever heard of Good to Great or Built to Last or Why the Mighty Fall, Jim Collins's books, he's actually got a new one coming out later this year or early next year about renewal, which is going to be incredible. But Jim, I spent 8 trips he took to West Point over a 2-year period. And when he was there, there was something at West Point, Meg will know this, right? But called the IOCT, the Indoor Obstacle Course. And it's this like miserable indoor physical fitness test that like you have to, I think for men it was 3:30, for women it was like 4 minutes. Like you had to go under a certain period of time to graduate. So it was a big pressure cooker kind of thing. And when he got there on the very first trip there, he heard cadets, when he was talking to cadets, kind of complaining about having to run the IOCT like the next day. And he's like, well, what's this IOCT thing? And they described, oh, well, you do, you crawl, on the ground, then you jump through tires and you go over a pommel horse and you climb on a shelf and right, then you jump through this thing and then you climb a rope and then you do these laps, in this building carrying a medicine ball. And they talked through it and he was fascinated by it. And Jim was at the time 54 and he was turning 55 years old the next year. And so he decided that he was going to do the IOCT and he was going to do it under 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And all the cadets, 20 years old, 21 years old are sitting there thinking to themselves, number one, why would you want to do that? But number two, they didn't think he could go sub 3:30. Because they knew, how young they were and how hard they had to work and train, to get that time. And so in getting to know Jim, he talked about his 50th birthday, and that when he turned 50 a few years earlier, he climbed El Cap in Yosemite. I'm sure most people here are familiar with that famous climbing wall, but on the face of Yosemite, there is a route called the Dawn Wall. And the Dawn Wall is like the sun hit it at dawn. And it was this crazy route that had never been climbed before. And so Jim partnered with a guy by the name of Tommy Caldwell. If you've ever heard of it, there's a whole documentary on it, if you're looking for a great documentary called The Dawn Wall. And it showed how Tommy Caldwell and Kevin Jorgensen, 2 guys, basically worked year after year to be able to climb the Dawn Wall. And it took them 6 years. And finally, on the 7th year, they did it. Well, Jim, when he turned 50, climbed, not the Dawn Wall, but he climbed El Cap. And so he was talking to me over and over again about the importance of putting, if you know Jim Collins' work, he talks about this idea of a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. The power of having a BHAG in life is critical. And he talked about it through the lens of a physical challenge. And that it compels training, it compels massive action. And so when you think about everyone here, right? And I don't see anyone here in their 20s, I don't think. Right? All right. There we go. I'm not so sure about that, Netta. Right? So I'm 45, right? So I'm getting and I'm it used to come a lot easier to us. We all know that, right? When you were younger, the challenges just came easier. You could drink more alcohol, perhaps. You could eat more crappy food. You could sleep less, and you could do all these things and get away with it. But as you get older, as we all know, not so fast. You can't do that. You've got to get smarter as you get older, right? You've got to get smarter about what you eat, about how you train, about how you sleep. Well, Jim talked about, again, if you put a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal in your calendar every year, and mix it up and do different things. And so one year, again, he did this endurance event where he did a 20-hour climb of a 3,300-foot vertical wall. And then a couple of years later, he's doing the indoor obstacle course at West Point in 3 minutes and 30 seconds, right? So this big, hairy, audacious goal can be to do, your first ever pull-up. It can be to do, a dead hang for 3 minutes. It can be to do a certain number of burpees in 24 hours. It can be to do your first ever half marathon. It can be to do a marathon in a certain time. I mean, the sky is the limit. And you can make it about whatever you want it to be about. But the power of the psychology is that you are publicly stating it, so you're sharing it with people so that you can't kind of like just hide, from people on it. Like you put it out there. And then what it does is it's that forcing function for you to put in the work. Because the reality is, there are very few people, I don't care what David Goggins says, and other people out there are very few people out there that have the self-discipline to just wake up day in, day out, and to put in the work. There are very few. Now, maybe if it's your job, right? Like, and that's certainly going to help you if like that's part of your livelihood and what you do, right? But the reality is, like, if you're working out kind of hard or even like moderately hard, like it kind of sucks. It's not fun, right? That's the whole point of the BFG is that like when it doesn't feel good, then it's kind of easy to go, I'll cash it in today. I'll sit today out. And before you know it, you're working out 2 days a week, right? Maybe 1 day a week. And so the power of the BFG is that it puts pressure on you to keep training, to keep putting in the work, right? Especially if you don't have that community, to hold you accountable. So if you belong to a local gym or you got a running partner or you got a battle buddy that you work out with that holds you accountable, that's awesome. But in many cases, like the season of life that I'm in, I got 5 kids and a farm, and like I don't get a chance to go out there and to be a part necessarily of a community-based gym right now. I have in the past, I will in the future, but right now that's not me. Right. But what I do have the ability to do is to state my BFG, to say this is what I'm going to do this year. And it forces me. It's my forcing function to put in the work. So I'll land the plane on this by saying, from my personal story from 2024, is that I had not run longer than 2 hours since 2015. Now, when I started Team Red, White, and Blue back in 2010, I ran 50 milers. I ran double marathons. I ran marathons for training, right? I was in like a beast mode running mentality back then. And then it just became too much time, too much effort, had kids, moved around. I had PCS from Michigan to New York, New York to Tampa, Tampa to North Carolina. Like, and so I did some running. I did some working out, but not a whole lot, if I'm being honest. And so, in 2020 during COVID, for the first time ever, my BFG was to complete Murph, right? Memorial Day Murph. 1 mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, 1 mile run, right? In weighted vest. That was my goal in 2020, right? And then in 2021, I had bought the Jacob's Ladder. I think everyone here knows the Jacob's Ladder. I know it's at UHP's gym, right? I bought that because I trained like crazy on that when I was deployed. On 2 of my 3 deployments, that was my pain cave to go to like work the stress off. And I did hardly anything with it for like 8 years. And then I made a goal that I was going to do the Jacob's Ladder for 1 hour straight without getting off, right? So that's what I did in 2021, right? 2022, I wanted to do a 7-minute and 30-second 2K row. I never rode before in my life. I bought a Concept 2 rower during COVID, and I was like, this thing is awesome, but I'm terrible at it. Right. And so I committed to training on it for a whole year. Right. And then in 2023, I did a 5K row and I got off the rower and I did a 5K run in 44 minutes or less because I was turning 44 years old. Right. So those are my BFG sort of like timeline, 2020 to 2023. Well, in 2024, a couple of people on the staff, the Team Red, White, and Blue, a couple of their friends, like they all kind of like said, hey, I want to go run the JFK 50 miler. And, I had not run it since 2013, a full 11 years ago. And so I said, all right, that's what I'm going to do this year. Right. So I went from not having run more than 2 hours in 9 years to training and running 9 hours and 56 minutes on November 23rd of this year. Right. And so again, the number of times that I would come in, especially in the summer when it's hot in North Carolina, and I'd run and I'd like drench the sweat out of my headband or take my shirt off and drench my shirt and just see it like drip. I literally would say out loud to people, like my kids and my wife, like, well, if it wasn't for my BFG, I would not have ran today. There's no way I would have done it today. right? And so again, putting in the work for basically 9 months got me from completely where I ran, and I ran a 4 mile in March, and that's it. Like I was like, I'm way older now. I don't think I can do this because I did the 4 miles, and I was like sore for like 3 days. Yeah, and then I ran another 4 miles, and I was like, man, and it took me like 2 months to get my legs back underneath me. I mean, it took forever, but finally got my legs back underneath me. And then again, I completed the JFK 50 as Cindy, was there because Cindy was there. So she was there kind of working some of the aid stations. So she saw, of course, every time people were around, I'm a bit of a spotlight ranger. So I was like smiling, all happy when I saw people that I know, right? But I was suffering, the rest of the time, but it was awesome. And the feeling of crossing that finish line, not because I'd done it before. I had done it 5 times before. So it wasn't like, oh, geez, I've never done this before, but it had been a long time. Really, it was the feeling of I was proud of myself for putting in the work and for training, starting back in March, for 8 months to get myself ready to complete that BFG, right? And then most importantly, right, or maybe not most importantly, maybe it's right up there. I knew that I was inspiring other people because I had been inspired by other people tackling their BFGs. Right. And I knew that people would see me post a picture on that in the Eagle app on social media. They would see that and go, good for you, man. Good for you. Right. Like you haven't run, more than 2 hours in like over a decade, and you put in the work and you trained and you did it. Right. So all that being said, I'll stop talking here in a minute and see what questions or feedback people might have. But, I just want to encourage everyone as you sort of like think about the year ahead of us in 2025. What is perhaps a fitness goal that you have that the current version of yourself can't do, that you would need to put in training, that you would need to commit to, and that if you did it, that you give yourself a shot. It's not a guarantee, right? Like you can fail. I could have went to that 50-miler and missed the time cutoff or fallen on the Appalachian Trail, and that could have happened. Like that's part of it. But to give yourself a chance and to give yourself a race day or a competition day or a BFG day, that you put it on the calendar. And for me, my birthday is December 21st. It's the shortest day of the year. So typically I've been doing a lot of my BFGs on my birthday, right? But you can make it be sometime in December. You can make it be on your birthday. You can make it be on a day that's significant to you when you entered the military, when you left the military. But if you do it, I think that you'll find very similar sorts of inspiration for yourself and then see how you inspire other people. So with that being said, I'll pause there and I'd love to hear any thoughts, feedback, questions based upon that.
My man, always bringing the energy, Mike. I love it.
Hard not to bring the energy when talking about the BFG, man. I tell you, I get fired up by this stuff because you see people do all kinds of amazing stuff.
Heck yeah, dude. So,
and by the way, we do have a BFG group. Go back, to what you said. Jacob said, like, not only in the Eagle app is there, VFF alumni group, but there's also a BFG group, and it's awesome. You see what people are doing; they're posting it, they're declaring their BFG, they're putting it in there. And that's pretty darn inspiring as well.
Yeah, I mean, credit to Meg Kelvington. She's messaging me on the side. She's like, how do we create something with our alumni in particular to tap into that? So expect to see something there sooner than later. So thank you for that, Meg. But anybody, any questions? My question is, man, the Jacob's ladder, what a sick punishment to do to yourself.
Yeah.
You called it the pain cave, and that's something that I can relate with when it comes to that kind of cardio exercise. You go somewhere and it's just therapeutic. But when you're at that point of exhaustion, like how do you push yourself through?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot. Because part of it is I give talks, leadership talks and talks about this kind of stuff. I had the honor to run for about 10 months in 2014 and 2015 with a guy named Sergeant Major Mike Morton. If you want to do a basic quick Google search into Mike Morton, The guy is unbelievable. He was a Navy salvage diver who, before 9/11, assessed for the Special Mission Unit out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And he did 11 years there. This dude still to this day, holds the U.S. record for the most miles ran in a 24-hour period, 172.46 miles.
Sheesh.
This dude was unbelievable. I mean, like, and here's the crazy thing. He won the Badwater 135. He came in second place at the Western States. He won one time. He won 100-mile races on back-to-back weekends. He won one on Saturday, and then he won another one on Saturday. The guy is unbelievable. He's about 5'6" from Muskegon, Michigan, from way north in Michigan. The dude, like, you would think he was born like, it should be like an Eskimo, and he loved running in the heat. I never understood it. But we would run at the time. He was assigned to SOCOM, as was I. I was an intel nerd, and he was down there as a liaison officer, and we would run from 11:30 till 12:30, Monday through Friday, right? And he would not bring a water bottle with him. We would do an 8-mile run. We would go out 4 miles, back 4 miles. And I would go through two 20-ounce water bottles. I had to like bring double holsters. And this dude would not even have a sip of water for 8 miles. I still don't understand it. But I'm telling you the story about him because I got to listen to him talk. So a lot of times it was me asking questions, and he's a big introvert, but I kind of made him talk because otherwise it was super awkward because it was an easy run for him. And I was like working really, really hard to be able to keep up. But he taught me a lot specifically about running and just in general, like the discipline of your mindset. I'll never forget after like one of our runs, we did 8 or 9 miles. The next day I said, "Hey man, just so you know, like I'm sore as hell right now. So like I'm going to be going a little bit slower today." And by the end of the run, he literally looked at me deadpan, like no bullshit. He was like, "Don't ever tell me about being sore again, because you're going to try to make me think like I can get sore." He didn't say it like a jerk, right? He just was like, but he was dead serious. He's like, "Yo, don't talk to me about being sore, because now you're gonna try to like infect me and make me think that I can get sore."
Wow.
Like this is the level of derangement, right? That this guy had. But his quote that I talk about all the time is that he would say it over and over again. If you think about the enormity of what you're doing, if you think about the 50 miles, if you think about how much it hurts right now, then of course that's going to break you. It's going to psychologically break you down. And he drove home the message over and over again. Break down the big stuff into small chunks. Focus on the small chunks. Smoke, then the next small chunk, the next small chunk. So what do you do on a 50-mile race? Like you certainly don't think about how far away you are from the finish line unless you want to just be demoralized. The opposite. You pick a tree about 100 yards down the road and you run to it. And then you pick another tree 100 yards away. And then you just keep picking off trees and you run, 100 yards at a time. Right. And you run 100 yards and then you just little bit by little bit before you know it. Oh man, I did 8 miles. Oh man, geez, we're at 14 miles. Oh wow, I'm at 20 miles. But again, if you think about, oh geez, that's great. I'm at 20 miles. I still have 30 miles to go. Or in the case of Jacob's Ladder, if you're like, oh man, like I just want to get off this thing right now because I'm at 34 minutes. And that means I still have 26 to go to hit my BFG. Right. And so a lot of it does have to do with what a lot of these, military celebrities talk about, Goggins and Jocko and Bear and all these, a lot of these people, like they talk about, it's all the same message, right? Like, it's this idea of quieting that inner voice that's telling you that like you can't do it. And so, yes, like that's great. Like, but you have to have the practical tools. And for me, the practical tools, right, of breaking pain down is thinking about smaller amounts, and then breaking it down in that way, and you do that whether you're feeling pain in the moment or whether you're doing some long race, right? And whatever it might be, like you've got to break down the big chunks, Jacob.
Well said. I've got another question, but does anyone else have one? Now's your time.
So I have one. I'll be honest. I love your positivity project, and I think I love it so much because I will call myself a realist. So I'm going to ask the question of what happens when you don't hit the BFG.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So as a quick word on this, for those of you who here has read the book called The Comfort Crisis, anyone? Anyone read the book called The Comfort Crisis? So
Yes.
great book by Michael Easter, phenomenal book. And in there, they describe something, they don't call it the BFG, they call it a misogi, right? A misogi, I think it's from Japanese culture, heritage, right? Where they talk about the power of doing something um, really hard. They don't necessarily say doing it every year, but they encourage you to choose a misogi every year. So what they say is, no, Mary, I have not announced my BFG yet. So I honestly, I'm still trying to think. I'm trying to figure it out. All right, this is my problem right now. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But like the part of the misogi is that there's a 50. You should have what they say for it to be a true misogi is that you should have a 50% chance of failing. In other words, like it should not be a guarantee at all. Like you shouldn't go, oh, I want to, you know, uh, you know, complete this marathon. Like you should say, I want to complete this marathon in this time, right? So they encourage you to put like a time, to put like a certain number on it to make it something where, and I'll be honest, like for me, like I thought 11 hours was my time for me. And then I got out there and I was making good time and making good progress. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can do 10:30. And then at about mile 25 or 26, I realized that if I averaged 10 minutes and 45 seconds per mile for the next 25 miles, that I could go sub 10 hours. Right. And so the reality is, if I'm being critical of myself, that I probably should have had a faster BFG time. My goal was not just to run the JFK 50 and finish it, right? It was to do it in 11 hours. And then that time, as I got in the fight, I lowered that time to my credit, right? After not to my credit, like not stating, like having a more ambitious time. So the idea here is you should not have a guaranteed success. And so I think starting
Mm.
out with, as long as you understand that's the framework, then that's important. That's an important framework, Meg, I think, because like inherently, if you don't succeed, it's kind of like a baseball. Like if you're only supposed to get a hit one out of every four times and you don't get a hit, you're like, oh, well, yeah, that's because you only get a hit. A good batter only gets a hit, three times out of 10. And so I think for the Misogi or for the BFG, it is about how much risk tolerance do you have, and do you really want to ensure? Because again, a BFG is not a Misogi. Misogi is 50% chance or greater to fail. BFG is like we don't necessarily encourage people to like have like that chance to fail, but like you can fail, right? Because you might get sick, right, in the big part of your train up, or you might get hurt, and so you weren't able to put in the train up, during a key part of it. And so whatever the reason is that you may not hit your BFG, and we've had people on our staff, right, who've gotten hurt. I'm thinking of Margaret on our team. Margaret hurt her knee. She had to go physical therapy, and so like she was tracking for the Army 10 miler. She was going to do the Army 10 miler, without walking. That was her goal, like to go through the whole thing and basically, to do 100 minutes, 10 minutes per mile, and then she got hurt, and so she couldn't do it. So there's absolutely, so what Norma said, extending your deadline, giving yourself grace. For sure. So that's like absolutely in the realm of reason, to do that, to say, hey, well, I'm not going to be able to hit that, right? So I'm going to extend it, and I'm going to push it out. The goal, though, I think, is that we want to attempt a BFG every year. And so if your BFG attempt date, if your BFG day is November or December, right, that might put you up against a timeline where then you have to push it into the next year. And I do think there's something great about kind of having a BFG catalog where every year you can kind of track your different BFGs and go, oh, yeah, back in 2021, I, did the Jacob's ladder for an hour straight. It's kind of cool to be able to kind of tell your BFG historical timeline.
So I've got a question to the group, or more specifically to Mike. Mike, how can we fit a BFG into the acronym SMART or SMART criteria? you want to make it achievable, but you
Right.
don't want to grab a low hanging fruit just so you could say, "Hey, I did it! Yay!"
Yep. Totally. So I think that, and this is where I think each person is going to be different, right? So I think there's definitely some room here for some flexibility here, based upon where you're at, where your fitness level's at, what you wanted to do, right? So if you've never run more than like, let's say a 10K, and then you want to do a marathon, it might be better to target a half marathon first, right? But if you think you can do it, right, then yeah, get after it. Say, hey, I'm going to do a half marathon in June, and I'm going to do a full marathon in October. And so I think that it does apply for each person what they do, and you do see people's individual psychology show up, Todd, like in this. That some people are like, hey, I want to try something that's really foreign to me or that's really hard to me. Like I think of Lonnie Faulkner on our team, like she still hasn't accomplished her muscle up, right? Like she definitely wants to do a muscle up, and she's been training forever for it. So different people have different approaches to what they want to do, and they have different levels of accepting failure. And again, going back to Tommy Caldwell, I'll never forget when Jim Collins brought him to West Point. And at this point, he was on year 5 of not completing the Dawn Wall, and a cadet raised her hand and says, "Hey, so like, how do you stay motivated to keep coming back to the Dawn Wall project every year when you just keep failing?" And he says, without missing a beat, he says, "That's a great question. It's because I don't view it as failure. I view it as growth." Right. And he's like, if you're going to do something really hard, you're going to not succeed. You're going to fail, call it whatever word you want. And if you view it as, oh, I failed, I suck, then yeah, that's going to beat you down. Right. But if you view that as, no, that's growth. And so Tommy viewed it as each year he would get further up the wall. He would get further along the wall and he would know what he had to do. And so I think that it really does apply to us individually. Like, what is it that we aspire to do? And then what are the odds, right? Or what percent do we have to succeed? I'm on the side of like, hey, I want to, so for me, even if I finished but didn't hit my time, I wouldn't have been like, oh, damn it, I didn't. Yeah, I would have been like still happy that I completed it and did it. And so for me, I like the idea of a BFG where you can complete it, and even if the BFG part, the big part, right, is the time. And if you don't quite hit the time, then that's okay. But that you still did the 5K row and then the 5K run. You still did the 1 hour on the Jacob's Ladder, 5,600 feet climbed or whatever. But yeah, so no answer key here. It's really, I think, up to each person individually to figure out how they would want to approach it.
Thanks, Mike.
I have a question. Well, I have a statement too. I'm glad you went and stated that instead of missing your goal, understanding that it's growth. As adults, we forget that.
Yes.
We forget the fact is that we have to go back and do AARs on the things that we didn't accomplish. Like, okay, where did I do good? What did I do well? Where did I go wrong? And what did I learn from it? And then how to go back and add those to your SMART goals, or add those to the next time you set another challenge out and you're trying to accomplish that challenge. Like, okay, this is where I didn't hit the SMART because of X, Y, and Z. Life might have started life, and I may have, didn't sleep well, something was going on. So that may
Yep.
have been a cause to why I didn't accomplish that goal. But if we don't go back and look at it as growth, we'll never really accomplish our BFF, our big F goal.
Yep.
So I appreciate
Absolutely.
you saying that. I appreciate you stating that, because we have to have a child set mind when we approach our BF goals, because anything can discourage us as adults because we're not as strong as we think we are.
Yeah. Spot on. And like, that's the thing, from a mindset standpoint, going back to Meg, to your question a little bit, it really kind of ties together, stitches together Meg, Todd, Henry, like all of you, like really it's this idea, and especially go figure, you guys have coaching mindsets, right? Like, how do you coach people when they might get hurt, or they might not hit their goal, or they might not be getting as strong as they want to, as fast as they want to. And I think that there's this balance that's really hard to hit, where on one hand, we want to be hard on ourselves or be hard on other people, because being hard, right? That's like what coaches do, right? That's what we do to, people who are going to be their best the best version of themselves, as great as they can be. They don't get there by, taking it easy on themselves. At the same time, having grace and knowing that just because you want to do something doesn't mean you're going to do it. Right? Like I work with some sports teams. Every sports team wants to win the national championship, right? There's only one that does, so it's not a matter of like everyone wants to, and and a lot of these teams put in the same amount of work, right? But it's this idea a lot of times of the mentality of, hey, do you know how to view that loss, not as like, oh, our season's over, but growth, and it's trying to hit that balance. It's really hard. It's hard to do as humans, right? And those that do it well tend to be happier and more successful, I think, than those that don't.
I love it, man. Any more questions? We still have a little bit of time left.
I've got one.
Hit it, Meg.
So, Mike, I understand the psychology and mindset around the BFG. And I agree to some extent. Has there ever been anyone that did one that was process based rather than a finish line?
Yes. So for sure.
And what does that look like?
Yeah. So I think that it really depends, again, going back to the personality thing, to me, like I care less about, what specifically is a person's, BFG. But the bottom line is it making you better? So JJ
Okay.
Pinter on our team, right? His daughter has got, she gets some brain seizures. And so like she was trying a ketogenic diet, right? And so JJ basically decided to kind of do that with her. And so for the year, his goal was to basically eat no processed sugar for the whole year. Like, I'm like, how do you even do that? Right? So that means like no ketchup, like anyone here who's ever done the Whole 30, I've done the Whole 30 twice. For the first like 4 days, I have a pounding headache, going through sugar withdrawals, and I eat pretty healthy, but like, the sugar turns up in all kinds of little things or whatever. And so, yeah, so from whether it be a process goal or a goal outside of like, hey, I want to hit a finish line. It's no, I'm committed to. So a BFG for you could be like, hey, I'm not going to drink alcohol this year, right? For a lot of people, it could be very much working on your, hey, I've got a BFG to get, for those of you who might track your sleep, I'm a big Aura Ring guy. Hey, I'm gonna, my goal here is to get this year is I want to average 7 hours of sleep, per night. For me, I kind of had it wasn't a BFG per se, but I had a goal a few years ago to start cutting back on caffeine. I drink now I do half calf coffee, and I basically have the equivalent to like 1 cup of coffee a day. I used to drink like 4 to 5 cups of coffee a day, including one at like 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night. Yeah. So like it can be, I think, any area of your life that you want to improve. You can set a big goal around that. Now the F in BFG is fitness, right? So I would say, hey, can you do 2? Can you do the no sugar thing plus, whatever it might be? Hey, I want to do 100 push-ups a day every single day for the whole year, right? Can you throw in something else that ties into the fitness? But the bottom line is the goal here is trying to make you healthier, right? And so there's a lot of different process, kind of goals you can choose. They're just not really, the F is not for fitness at that point. That's the only small thing. So.
I haven't even set mine yet this year, so I feel pretty guilty. But now is the time to be thinking about it. So I'm thinking maybe I'm going to do it in tiers, maybe like something Q1, something Q2, and build towards.
And you can do that too. Goal. You can do that too, right? Some people do that as well. And like Mary asked the question, hey, have I figured out mine? The good news is you don't have to declare it like on January 1st. You don't have I think you want to have it set by the end of January, in the next 3 weeks. I think by then you'd want to have. It's declared. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm getting challenged by some people like, oh, you do a lot of endurance BFGs. You should do like a strength one, I don't know if anyone here follows or knows who Ryan Hall is, but he's the fastest, like half marathon. He did like a 59-minute
put on 50 pounds of muscle in the last
Yeah,
few years.
yeah, like he's crazy, and his wife, I think, is like one of the best female American marathon runners in the country right now. And he like just totally changed, and now he's jacked. And it's so weird because he used to be like a beanpole, and now he's like ripped. So I'm thinking about doing something tied to strength. Um, but I don't know because like it's so again, part of this is it's got to be practical. So I don't have a home gym. And so for me, part of it here is I do have land and I have 1.2 mile trail, and I've got some things like that. But so I'm trying to think through like what I want to do. So I'm all ears for people who've got ideas.
Well, here's my strength goal, and I was in the club at one time, and then I was out of the gym due to a little bit of a physical issue for about 4 months. So my goal is to get back to the 1,000-pound club. So that's combined
Nice.
back squat and bench press. So you can start pressing your tractor or something, or pick up some of the tires.
That's right. There you go. True story. I can
What's the
definitely do some
kid
stuff here on the
that's
farm.
yeah, what's the kid that's so famous? He like shoots hoops at the barn and he's like built all of his own equipment. Do y'all see that on your Instagram, like y'all
I've seen
social
it.
feeds?
I've seen it in the past. Yeah.
Yeah,
What's
yeah. That's you, Mike. That's next for
Yeah.
you,
I
man.
got I got to figure something
Who's
out.
that? Who is it? Sergeant Blue or
Oh yeah. What is his name? UHP partnered with
Yeah.
him towards the
yeah,
end of last year.
Yeah.
That dude's
Blue.
a freak.
Yeah.
yeah. Follow
Wild.
some of this stuff, Mike.
Yeah. So I got to think through it. So it might be a strength-based thing. I don't know. Might be I want to get to a certain number of pull-ups unbroken, right number of pull-ups in a day.
Hmm.
That's most people don't know. That's how Goggins kind of came into like more popularity. Is like he set the record for like the most number of pull-ups in a 24-hour period or in an hour. I can't remember. It was something like that. But
Hmm.
so I might try to do something tied to that, or maybe tied to push-ups. I don't know. I got to think through it, but. I've done a lot of endurance, a lot of cardio endurance stuff is my BFGs.
Nice. Well, last question here, and then we'll cut it loose unless someone else wants to chime in. But
I got one
um,
question, Jacob.
hit it, Mike.
Mike, is there a reward other than the accomplishment?
So it's a good question. So going back to the individual psychology, I think different people approach it differently, right? So no, I think the reward for most people, and most of it, I think, Mike, it's the intrinsic motivation, right, of trying to accomplish the goal. I do think that there is some external validation that comes from it. What we see is when people post about their BFG in the Eagle app, on social media, like the number of people who flock out of the woodwork to congratulate you, to praise you, and even if you didn't make it, to applaud your effort. Like Mike Sullivan, our chief of staff, he did the JFK 100 this year. He tried it. He ran 50 miles from the end line of the JFK to the start line through the middle of the night, and he turned around and ran it back. And he didn't make the cutoff at like mile 32. But the number of people that applaud you for trying your BFG or doing it, to me, that's probably the greatest reward that comes from it externally, is people celebrating you. When you share it on social media. But that's much less meaningful than the internal knowledge of like, hey, I put in the work here and I did it.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Love it. Well, what role does making it public play?
So you don't have to, right? You don't have to, but I think that it's easy to move the goalpost if you don't. So, it's easy to say, well, I started out the year wanting to do this, and then I got sick, or I had a lot of travel, and so I didn't work out, or this or that, right? And then you kind of, and it's totally logical, realistic stuff, right? Like totally understandable. But you do that, and then you can very easily move the goalpost on yourself. It's like, wait a minute, I thought you said you were going to do the JFK 50, and now you're doing a marathon. So you can see how you can very easily kind of set yourself up for failure in that way. And so the power of making it public, I think, is that it's a timestamp and it's a, hey, this is I'm telling the world, like, this is what I'm doing. But you don't have to, for sure. You can keep it private.
Appreciate it.
But
Man.
you do miss out on, I think, on the inspiration. You miss out on inspiring other people and drawing inspiration and positive energy from them celebrating you.
Yeah, yeah. And the accountability, I think, will be critical for me is to like put it out into the ether and have, my people hold me accountable. Um,
Totally.
well, appreciate you, Mike, man. What a
Yeah.
great, inspiring way for us to kick off 2025. We're going to ask you to come back and do this again in
Yeah.
2026 because this has become a tradition for
Good.
us and such a privilege. We'll record this. We'll have this shared out with everyone who wasn't able to make it here with us tonight. But on behalf of everyone here at VFF, man, thank you. You're the best.
Thank you. Thank
Let's
you
have a
guys.
great new
Appreciate it.
year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate the chance to spend a little time with you here tonight. Hopefully, again, the key here is hopefully not just you choosing the VFG, but then finding someone else and challenging and encouraging them to do it, right? That ripple effect, right? So that's I think the goal here, and that's how we change lives, right? Is one by one. So
Yep. I challenged Meg Kelvington. So done and done.
all right,
So
guys.
quick follow-up for VFF. Next week we have Johnny's call on Monday,
I'll see you guys.
group
See you, Mike.
coaching
Thank you.
on Thursday. And as Mike put out and as we mentioned, please use the Team RWB app, find the UHP alumni group. And in addition to, if you want to join the BFG group, if you choose to do a BFG, there we go. Thanks, guys. Put that BFG in the chat. We are going to start promoting that on our group calls. And you will see it in the newsletter next week. Hint, hint, please open that email. And if you have any questions on anything coming up, our email addresses are our first name at veteransfuture.org. We make it pretty easy. Cindy, thanks so much for joining us. Always great seeing you on these. Ryan and Jacob, did I miss anything coming up?
Nope.
All right. Cool.
Nope. BFG challenge announcement incoming,
Well, for those doing the IBA, we start Tuesday night for cohort 1. For those not in cohort 1, we will, I think Johnny and I said, looking at cohort 2 come this springtime, but we want to get a solid start on the first one. And if you are in cohort 1 and you've got questions on things, hit me up now because session 1 is Tuesday night.
Perfect. All right, guys. That's a wrap for us.
All right.
Thank you all
See
for
y'all.
joining. Yeah, see you soon.